So as we think about the end of the season, right, and the end of the regular season being this week, I just also wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to everybody who's been following along, everybody who's been following the picks, everybody who's been following on Instagram, on Twitter, and as well as on YouTube. It's been a really, really great year. As I said before, the monetary success has certainly been there from a betting perspective. So I hope you guys were able to cash in on that. But just from the concept of doing this again, doing this show, getting on the mic and putting this stuff out there again has been a goal of mine, and something that I've thought deeply about for a while, and really tried to think about how I wanted to do this as much as I wanted to just get out and do it. So I really appreciate everybody that's listened, everybody that's kind of given advice, given critiques, even everybody that tells me they don't like what color shirt I'm wearing. I appreciate all of it. It's nice. It's nice to see that people are engaged by what we're putting out. And again, just couldn't appreciate you guys more for tuning in this year. And I wanted to leave this podcast off, seeing as it's New Year's. This will come out just after New Year's Day. So you'll see a lot of stuff in 2026 about pieces of advice from people, and I do try to give out advice about betting on sports throughout the course of the season, and that's kind of what the show has been all about. But I'm gonna try to avoid some of that cookie cutter stuff, or some of the stuff that might be obvious to some, or some of the stuff that's purely about betting. There is a lot of betting 101 we can do, and again, always ask questions in the Discord and tune into each of the episodes as I try to talk about that stuff as it comes up. But I'm gonna skip that a little bit for right now, and I'm gonna do my 5 tips for 2026. These are both betting tips, but also kind of just mentality, life, expectation managing. So yeah, I'm gonna close this podcast off with 5 tips, and I hope you guys can take something from this. All right. So number 1, don't define your success by arbitrary units of time. Right. This is an NFL show for the most part, right? We're following the NFL on a week-by-week basis. It's really easy to judge yourself whether or not you made money this week. We came, before sports betting was fully legalized, before PASPA, right? Everybody was using bookies, and as the states kind of one by one legalized themselves, right? You had a lot of people just using bookies, and when you bet with a bookie, right, you square up every week or whatever, and again you sort of train yourself to determine if your success is if you have success based on whether or not you have to pay somebody, and whether you use bookies, or you're betting offshore, or you're betting on DraftKings and FanDuel and all of our other partners, right? However you're betting, you really don't judge yourself by a week, right? Don't judge yourself by even a month sometimes. It really depends, because these units of time are not relevant to your process. Your process in betting on sports and, doing what you need to do to be able to make good and solid bets, they don't care about whether you've made 2 or 3 in a row, right? They don't care about if all the games are stacked during a Sunday in week 18 or not. They care about volume and sample size. So my first piece of advice for 2026 is to kind of stop using these arbitrary units of time to define you. It's the question you want to ask yourself, right, is this a true barometer of your process? Does that sample size of 1 week, let's say, show you anything about your work or the work that you did? And what I'll try to do kind of with the rest of this is talk about how, this applies to betting, and this also can apply to your life. And I've learned a lot about my approach to doing things through betting on sports, and through this kind of analytical process. So Again, yeah, don't use these arbitrary units of time to define yourself. Don't turn your life into a deadline. Tip number 2, judge yourself by your process, not by your outcome. This kind of goes hand in hand with number 1, but one of the biggest traps per se in betting is kind of letting the result tell you how you feel about the decision. You make a bad bet that wins, and suddenly it gets retroactively justified. You make a good bet that loses, right, or especially a couple in a row, you start to question everything. Outcomes are not the way you want to judge yourself. Processes are. You can do the right thing and lose money for weeks on end, right? We talked about that on this show, how weeks 1 through 3, we just had a bunch of really bad luck. We had a bunch of quote-unquote bad beats. And yeah, that was tough. It's tough to start a year, down, let's say, 10 units or so. And then, again, just to show you, to think about it over time, right? We're now sitting at plus 32 while starting easily minus 10. So it's a long process, and really you want to judge whether or not you are making the right bets by if you would make them again. You need to obviously learn to judge your own process and make sure your process is working. But my point being, it's far more important to judge your process than it is to judge your outcome. And this is what you do in your life. You can make thoughtful and disciplined decisions and not get rewarded immediately. It doesn't mean that you failed. If you stop judging yourself solely by your outcomes, you'll slowly train yourself to abandon good habits and choose validation instead. And that's just not where you want to be. Number 3, and this is for all my brain rot generation of scrolling and endless information. Number 3, do not seek immediate gratification. Sports betting is a scary marketplace right now, and that's because of how fast everything moves. You have thousands and thousands of options at your fingertips at all times, right? Games last a few hours. NFL drives, they take a few minutes. You can make a live bet on the next scorer, and that resolves within seconds. This starts to train you to seek instant gratification with your risked money. And at the end of the day, this is extremely taxing on your mind. You're training yourself to crave resolution and not really concerning yourself with the quality, especially if you get a little lucky and you win, right? This is the feeling of chasing. This is kind of chasing the next bet. This gets you in all kinds of different, mental traps where, all right, I lost a couple bets in a row. All it takes is one to get out, right? All I got to do is just get back to even. There's a really good article that, kind of circulated gambling Twitter, this week about how our generation of people are kind of, the gambling generation, right? We're all in this mindset of it. It's better to bet big and try to chase these 99th percentile outcomes. Well, not that it's better, but we rationalize it as better to bet big and chase these big outcomes because mediocrity is something that that we fear so much. I'm not going to get into the psychology of that too much on this podcast, but what I do take from that is important to kind of carry on is trying to remove yourself from that instant gratification. And that goes hand in hand with the timeline type of commentary where you don't want to be seeking a win every single day, win every single hour, right? The goal here, right, is to make money betting on sports, and that's what we want to do. But there's no reason for you to create these arbitrary timelines, and there's no reason for you to seek them to be so much faster than they need to be. Sports betting is a process. Anything you do that requires skill and effort is a process. Anyone can get lucky, and there are going to be millions of people who will get lucky tomorrow, and you don't need to do that. If you do, good. That's great. I hope you're happy with that outcome, but you don't need to chase that. So just don't seek immediate gratification, and remember that the market is kind of making that impatience feel productive. All right, number 4, don't forget the game that we're playing. There are more voices than ever in sports betting. Former athletes are on network TV giving out picks. People are arguing over sports betting lines like they're taking a hot take. You have thousands and thousands of faceless Twitter accounts that are feeding you. They're throwing on your feed all these winning slips and bets and stuff like that. And there's a lot of nonsense that gets posted, gets said. And for 2026, it is extremely important for you to remember what you're trying to do. Don't get distracted by people that don't do what we do, right? Don't get distracted by people who, have a platform and give out an opinion. You don't need to treat that as, immediately better than yours. You want to remember to kind of think through stuff and understand a why, right? Don't, saying a team's going to cover 6.5 points because you think they will, right? That's not edge. That's not EV. And that's not what we're after here. But you have a lot of media consumption that is catered towards that, again, that instant gratification, that quick pick, that in your face, Saints are going to win today. You should bet it without any concept of price, without any concept of bankroll. And this is what's feeding into, the next generation of gamblers. So again, my number 4 piece of advice in 2026 is don't forget the game that you're playing. It's pricing, it's probability, it's discipline. Part of the reason I called this the Noise Podcast was like kind of a play on the irony of how much fluff and quote unquote noise there is. How do we cut through it? How do we figure out what matters, what signal? That's what it's all about. So as a key core principle, don't forget that in 2026. And my final piece of advice for 2026 is make the most of your life. A big reason for me restarting this podcast in 2025 was the unsettling feeling that I'd left something on the table. I grappled with this honestly for a few years, trying to justify whether I should or shouldn't get back in the game, get back behind the mic. And now that I'm here and we did, I'm really happy that I did. Don't wait to believe in yourself. Don't get caught up in dreaming or, waiting for perfect conditions for you to do what it is you want to do. Do what you enjoy. Broaden your knowledge, widen your skill set, pursue the passions that you told yourself you don't have time for. This doesn't have to be a 2026 thing. This doesn't have to be once I do this, then I'll do that. Just make the most of your time, and it works out so nicely that we can do this in 2026. But that's my final piece of advice for you guys. Thank you so much for listening to the Noise Podcast. This is your host, Max Gilson. Godspeed.